Today we talked about percent word problems and how they can be solved using this proportion, the is over of proportion. A percent, any percent, is an equivalent ratio. And to take one step back, a ratio is a comparison of the sizes of two numbers. Well, a percent is an equivalent ratio, so the ratio is the same, but the denominator is always out of 100 parts. A percent is a part to whole comparison, the whole being the 100%. It's the entire amount. So when I say to you, give me 25%, I'm asking you, whatever it is I'm asking you for, say give me 25% of your money. We're going to take the entire amount of your money and I'm going to break it into 100 parts and take 25 of those parts. A percent is an equivalent ratio. And because it's an equivalent ratio, we can use a proportion to solve it. And the way you do that with this is over of proportion is by using the language of the problem. So I did 1 and 2 in class today. I'm actually going to skip down here to number 4. 35 is 70% of what number? Now I'm asking you to do two things here. The first is to use this tape diagram, this double number line, to estimate. You don't have to calculate. I mean, you can if you're comfortable with it, but I wanted you to estimate because a double number line, a tape diagram, shows us the ratios. It gives us a visual way of seeing how the sizes compare. It helps us to see a percent and how that relates to quantities from the problem. So on the bottom part of my double number line I have percents. 0% would be none of that bar filled in. 100% would be all of the bar filled in. On the top I'm keeping track of my quantities, so the numbers from the problem. So my problem says 35 is 70% of what number? 35 is 70% of what number? Well, that of what number, that means that's my unknown. I've got to find out what that is. Of what number? Of is the whole thing. Of would be my entire group, whatever this 100% is. I'm given that 35 is 70% of this whole thing, the whole in the part to whole ratio. The tape diagram helps me to estimate, because I know that 50% is half and 75% is 3/4, and I could think about 25% also. 25%, that's 1/4. What I know from this problem is that 35 is 70% of this number. So right here is about where 70% would be. 70%. And I know that 35 is 70% of this number. So my estimate, well, I know it can't be 70. X can't be 70 because 35 would have to be exactly 50%. If I double 35, I would get 70, and that would just be too much. I know my answer has to be less than 70. I also know that it's going to be pretty close to, let's see, this is about, let's see, I got 1, 2, I'm about 2/3 of the way from 0 to the end here. So if I thought of this as thirds, then I could take, let's see, 1 part, 2 parts. I could take about half of this to give me this. So half of 35, that's what, like 17, 18, something like that. If I add that, I can estimate that it should be about 53. I'll estimate that it's about 53. I'll just add 18 to 35, and that'll give me my entire bar. So it'd be like 17 and a half, well actually 17 and a half. 17 and a half plus another 17 and a half plus another 17 and a half. That would give me right about 53. So my answer's got to be around there. The tape diagram we're just using to estimate. We're just using to estimate to know what's too big, what's too small, what can't be possible for our answer. Now the is over of is where we can solve. So I will use the language from the problem. This is the percent proportion. I'm comparing quantities in my first ratio and finding an equivalent ratio out of 100. So they tell me 35 is, so I'd place 35 in the is part of my ratio, of my proportion. 70%, so that's here, percent goes there, of what number? That's the part I don't know. Now I can solve. 35 times 100 has to be equal to 70 times x. And I can use cross products and solve, or I can just see that 35 times 2 is 70, so x times 2 is 100. The only number that could be in place of x is 50. So x is 50. So my estimate here was pretty close. Not right on, but it was pretty close. X is 50. What is 70% of 18? This one's similar. I think estimating is a little bit easier here. So 0% would be nothing. What is 70% of 18? Well, of 18, that means 18 is my whole, W-H-O-L-E, of the part to whole ratio. So 0%, 18 is 100%. So that means, I can easily do this one in my head, 50%, half of 100% is 50%, half of 18 is 9. The number I'm looking for is 70%, so that would be about here. So I can use that to estimate. I know that my answer has to be bigger than 9, definitely smaller than 18. Another thing I can think about is halfway between 9 and 0, well, halfway between 50 and 0% is 25%. Halfway between 9 and 0 is 4.5. So that means this 25% is 4.5. This 25% is 4.5. And another 25% would be another 4.5. So 9 plus 4.5 would give me 13.5. So 75% is 13.5. I'm going to estimate that 70% is probably about 13. That's going to be my estimate. Now I can use the is over of proportion to solve. What is, well, I don't know. For the is part, 70% goes here, the of part, and of 18, 70 goes in the percent part, 18 goes of part. So now I can use the cross product shortcut, 70 times 18 and divide by 100, and I'll have my answer.